Hello, welcome to, what is this, lecture 4? It's chapter 23, Industrialization and its Discontents. Okay, we're gearing up here this week as well for our midterm test, midterm exams. So hopefully this will help you pull together a lot of the things we've been talking about. Now, I know I might have said this before about something being really, really important, but this time I'm really not joking. The Industrial Revolution is probably the most important revolution that has ever happened in human history, or at least the most important revolution in human history, since the agricultural revolution. Because you couldn't have had industrialization if you wouldn't have had first complex human civilizations, which come from agricultural technologies, and that simply being able to plant seeds. But today we're not talking about that. We're talking about industrialization, right? We're talking about what it was in the end of the 1700s that made Britain and then the Netherlands quickly industrialize. First of all, what do we mean by industrialization? It simply is a revolution in productivity, how your society produces stuff. And your chapter here, chapter 23, open chapter 23, if you have your textbook there in front of you, as you should have. It starts out with a little story of a woman who leaves her town in rural Vermont and goes to the urban centers. This is similar, you see, if you've studied American history as well, similar to in African American history, the Great Migration from the South to the industrial northern cities. There were diasporas of people that were dislocated by industrialization. Diasporas, dispersals of people, right? And industrialization spreads unevenly after it first occurs in Great Britain and the Netherlands. Industrialization will set up a lot of debates. Look at the chapter name of this section or this chapter. It's industrialization and its discontents. Well, who wouldn't be happy with industrialization? It does produce these huge new mountains of wealth, and it makes goods cheaper when you produce them more, more efficiently. But there were criticisms of this new economic break with the past. This is capitalism, right? Industrialism, capitalism simply means the pursuit of more and more wealth, the capital in society. Was it a revolution? I think it really was. Your textbook says that some historians still debate this, but in a sense, this was a revolution in the way people would work. Think of the new factories and how that was different than working in rural settings. You have a manager or a foreman looking at you. Your work is monitored. You're paid by the time you spend right there in the factory, as opposed to being paid piecemeal, by the piece that you produce, or, for a day's labor. England is the first one to implement mechanized power for the production of textiles. That's the other thing about the Industrial Revolution, what I call the first stage of the Industrial Revolution, which comes with the invention of the steam engine. And you see in your textbook all of the different inventions related to the Industrial Revolution. They're all in textiles, the production of cloth. But why was Britain first? Why not China? Why wasn't it China? Because before this, China really had led the world's production. but something was happening in Britain. It has nothing to do with the advancement of the people or anything special like that. But it's, as your textbook says, this is a quote, a myriad of complex interactions that we're still all trying to comprehend. That's a quote directly from your textbook, page 789, I believe. The preconditions, what were those? It says, subtitle, coal and colonies. This is the theory that England or Great Britain, which refers to all of the island, England and Scotland and Wales, in Great Britain, that they had the natural resources to take advantage of this new fuel supply, coal. It was an island afloat in a sea of coal. And they had this empire, this trading network. So they were all ready to export all of this cheaply produced wool and cotton textiles, finished fabrics, to lots of places around the world. You remember we talked about mercantilism, that started with the Spanish, but then the British and the French, they placed all these tariffs on outside goods and to bring the wealth back to the mother country. That was mercantilism. It's now leading to this new form of capitalism and the Industrial Revolution. So they're making all this money from overseas. Some might say exploiting those colonies and those people as well. Some might even say and point out that some of the profits that are not a small amount of profits that are accumulating in Great Britain come from the slave trade, come from sugar, tobacco, coffee, tea, and then they want to invest all those piles of money into more and more profitable businesses like textile industry. England also has this banking center as well, a modern banking system. You can get credit there. So keep that in mind. England also has a population, a heavy population. And think too how this is produced by interactions with more and more of the world. The potato allowed population growth to increase in England because you need lots and lots of workers. They had productive farms there that had been run by, like businesses, a kind of second agricultural revolution. Population boom. They had all the coal they needed. They had 9 million people. They were drawing all these profits from what they called their warm weather colonies. This provided the network of trade routes, which allowed them to have the piles of money to invest in the steam engines, in the spinning jennies, in those textile mills, and make cotton very cheaply. Your textbook talks about how it also comes from proto-industrialization. Look up that there in your textbook, proto-industrialization, P-R-O-T-O. Proto-industrialization just means on a small scale. And finally, in this list of things of why Great Britain was first and not another country, was the scientific revolution. It flourishes there in England. It was the center of conversations between scientists and more practical men. That's a direct quote on page 791 in your textbook. Look at page 791. So England had the Enlightenment, a scientific revolution, emphasis on understanding and ingenuity of doing things differently by using the laws of science. Remember we talked a little bit about Isaac Newton and the laws of science a couple chapters ago. This is the Industrial Revolution is when the factory system and the mills begin to evolve. And I want to point this out, and this isn't made a big deal. It's pointed out in your text, but it's not emphasized enough, I don't think. There are 3 stages to the Industrial Revolution, all right? I can guarantee you this will be on the quiz, okay? 3 stages of the Industrial Revolution. First stage is what I've been talking about. It's a revolution in production from the new machines of the steam engine. By burning coal that produces steam, it's basically a big hot water heater, but it turns with incredible force a wheel that you can build stuff with or produce stuff with. That's the first industrial revolution. And they have all this coal. How do you get the coal to the mine? They got this great idea: we'll put a steam engine on rails and we'll bring the coal to the mine with a steam engine. Voila, we have the invention of the railway. This is the other thing that defines the first industrial revolution. The dates that I give for this industrial revolution was 1775 to 1875. So to review, the first industrial revolution lasts from 1775 to 1875. And what comes after that? Well, this is the later industrial revolution. I date it a little bit differently from your textbook. It's not a big deal, but 1875 to 1975. This is the era of the smokestack factories. Of the other thing that defines it is steel production. It's called the Bessemer process. It is a revolution in energy with electricity, in chemicals, and things like rubber. So you have chemicals like new dyes. You also have new energy. It's not an energy source, but it's a way of conveying energy, and that's electricity, right? I wish electricity were an energy force, an energy in and of itself, the source of energy, because then we could just go out and harvest electricity. But instead, we have to, quote unquote, generate electricity. You can look at the different inventors and scientists who are associated with the Second Industrial Revolution. Tesla. This is a revolution in communications as well, with the telegraph, Morse code. The internal combustion engine is also what defines the Second Industrial Revolution, right? It's not just steam engines anymore, which are really big, but it's using petroleum and an internal combustion engine to make engines a lot smaller than steam engines. Then that, of course, creates that's the building block of creating the first automobile, the first airplane. It's funny when you research airplanes, and they were first trying to build airplanes with steam engines as engines. It doesn't work so well, especially when you have to bring like 5,000 gallons of hot water up in the air with you, right? Okay. The other thing that's revolutionized during the Second Industrial Revolution is warfare. The Gatling gun, rapid fire artillery, rifled muskets. Those of you who are in the military, for example, should know quite a bit, I would imagine, about clip-fed rifles, the recoil cylinders, so your gun doesn't jump when you fire it, and you don't have to re-aim it. The Gatling gun. All these military technologies, as we're going to see here in the next chapter, unleash a scramble to imperialize in the late 1800s. Okay, now I want to make sure that I close out this idea, though, of the three industrial revolutions. The third one isn't mentioned in this chapter, but I like to emphasize it as well, so you can conceive of history, modern history, in three industrial revolutions. The first one, to review, the steam engine, the textile mills, and the railways. The second one, the second industrial revolution, involved building off of the first, of course, but the internal combustion engine, the production of new forms of what we call metallurgy, the production of steel and the Bessemer project. You can't have airplanes without steel. You can't have skyscrapers without steel. And, of course, rubber and the chemical revolution as well with new industrial dyes. That all lasts from 1875 to 1975. Well, you might be asking yourselves, what comes after that? Well, we won't talk about it too much until the very end of our class in the last week, but that's the third industrial revolution. Is really the computer age and the invention of the microchip and the first computers. It's the IT era, and it's an era, I think, too, of more diversifying sources of energy, not just simply coal and petroleum anymore, but a whole host of new energies. That's the third. It lasts from 1975. When does it end? It hasn't ended yet. It's still going on, right? It's still disrupting our world today, especially as our factories become more and more automated. I like this outline of the three stages of the Industrial Revolution because it gives you an outline through which you can see the last 250 years of human history. The first Industrial Revolution, steam power. The second Industrial Revolution, internal combustion engine, cars, steel, dyes, rubber. The third Industrial Revolution, of course, then is the computer age. Okay, now I'm not as concerned with you knowing all of the material in the last half of the chapter, especially when it's talking about other scientific developments. The second Industrial Revolution, that period in the late 1800s and early 1900s, was really a boom time for new theories of Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, for example, and the idea that the Earth was created by a long process of evolution and even humankind's themselves. You have Einstein's notion of relativity. The main thing I want you to be aware of, though, is that industrialization becomes contagious. All nations want it because they realize that it equals power. And also you should be aware, as the title suggests, that the Industrial Revolution had its critics, and specifically those critics, those people who saw it not necessarily as a good thing, were people known as socialists and communists. And Karl Marx you can read about in this chapter. And I'll leave you with the ideas of Karl Marx, probably the most popular and most significant critic of capitalism and the Industrial Revolution. It's not as though he wanted to turn the clock back, and in this way Marx was revolutionary, because unlike some people who were critical of capitalism and wanted to turn the clock back, Marx instead, he wants to introduce something completely different. He believes capitalism is necessary to reach the next stage of development, which is communism. He thinks that capitalism exploits workers. Here's the main thing to understand about Marxism and communism. I can guarantee this will be on the quiz too. Marxism and Karl Marx himself believes that the key to understanding history was class struggle. The struggle of people for wealth in society, and that society is separated between those people who control how wealth is made, the factory owners, and those people who are exploited by that system, who really don't have a stake in the system and don't enjoy the profits from it. That's communism. And what Marx Marx sees happening is that capitalism is unstable, because think of it, it's all these different companies competing with one another. And it goes through cycles of recessions and depressions and boom times and depressions. He said soon workers are going to recognize their place in this exploitative capitalist system, overthrow it, and put in place a communist system which will make an equal society where workers will be treated equally or receive very similar pay, and the government will eventually, Marx said, not even be needed anymore, because why would there ever be crime and the need for police and a lot of laws when all workers' needs are met? Everyone has full stomachs, education, right? This is Marx's idea. So I'll leave it there today. There's a lot of information in this chapter. Be focused on the first half of the chapter. That's where you'll mostly be tested, okay? I will see you all soon.